Good is an amazing site, like a magazine site, very intelligent, and everything about it you can tell is just done very intelligently. And so there's a bunch of stuff to show here. I mean, one of the other points I want to make is that when you have information with air around it, with space around it, with these fine rules can work really, really well to break up the information. You can actually have an awful lot of information on the screen without overpowering it or feeling anxious. There's an understated color scheme. Although I must point out that when you actually get to reading something, it's highly readable, because one of the things I personally feel that web designers do sometimes is create things that look pretty but are hard to read. They might have like a pale gray font with a wide column width, and not enough air around it, and it's like, oh, it looks beautiful, but is it easy to read? I mean, what about when you get to actually reading? So they have a really pretty font. It's probably Georgia. It's not a huge font size, but that's even okay for my eyes because it's a very narrow column width and it has a lot of air around it. Let's see, there's some other amazing things about this. Like, well, let's see, it's going to give you lots of little rewards again to show you that it's alive. I don't know how else to say this, but these little hover touches, which again, how do we put this into a web design process that breaks out of the Photoshop comp converted to a static sort of non-living feeling page model. And actually one of the things that really gets my goat a lot of times with the designers along those lines, which is really simple, is designing, specifying the color that's going to happen when you hover over a link. So HTML provides so that you can have a different color when you're hovering over, which shows it's alive, It also has a different color, can have a different color when you're clicking, which in this case is black, and it can have a different color when you've visited the link too. So you don't have to do all of those, but you can. By the way, also notice that they use the traditional underlined text here, which I think is fine. I mean, it looks beautiful, it looks fine. You can also use colored text, but one of the other sort of pet peeves I have sometimes with designers is they want it to look pretty and they don't think underlined text looks pretty, and so they take it out. But it's a convention. It's a convention that indicates you'll get something when you click here. So, I think correctly colored text will work as well at this point, but it's really helpful if something happens when you hover over it too, like maybe when you hover over it, the underline reappears. That's a nice thing. Another thing here is that, look, if I hover on the back here, look on the left, there are all these slightly different colors for the different categories of this site. So it's obviously very important for them that they have produced a site with a lot of information that they really care about, and they care about organizing neatly, and everything from the littlest detail down to the biggest structure implies that and rewards you. And of course they must have a lot of editors and things to make that be a reality in terms of the content as well. But it's really cool. So if I'm on one of these bars, I think if I click here, something might happen, and indeed it does. I could be anywhere on the bar. I don't even have to be over here hovering over it for it to change. And then also the bar in question is highlighted, so it tells me where I am in the system, which is really nice. And another point to make is that there's a really important concept in web design called information architecture, which really gets lost a lot in the web design process sometimes, which is because it's sort of like a lot of times how the website is going to go, except on a really technical level, ends up being determined by the designer, and the designer's training is usually in probably some branding and just sort of visual stuff and graphic design. And so that can often create a good sense of an initial message and a feel, maybe even a nice branding statement, possibly even a nice tagline, and some good colors and things that reflect in a general way the feel of the site, but they don't necessarily reflect the organization of the information. And in terms of like words, like, what are the categories that we should have here? What are the things that we need to have up here? And I mean, it's one of those things that when you see it. I think as a designer, you could really relate to the idea that, a client comes to you and they go, we want a site that's very simple. And you realize that it's very simple because you've taken all this time to pare away all the things that weren't necessary and just show the things that were, and that can actually be a lot of work. Well, this is exactly the same thing with information architecture on the content, the words side. And I found, honestly, like a lot of designers are not necessarily word people. I think it would be really wise to have a designer integrated more with someone who understands what the web can do in the design process, like I'm showing, and also someone might even be a different person who understands how to structure the information. Because at the end of the day, this is about information. This is about information delivered in a pleasing way. I mean, this is an incredibly good example, this site right here. So, like, there's a harmony between the information and the design, and I'm not sure if that's something that one person should try to do by themselves. Actually, it would make my brain explode to have to do it. So there's a lot to be said for really taking the time to sit down and figure out what the information architecture is, and it also has a lot to do with how your client thinks. How does the target audience think about these things? What do they need to know? You might actually sit down and ask them, but then these are things that often never make it into the design process because there's a certain thrust, maybe it comes from print, it comes from people being busy, it comes from people being impatient, it comes from, honestly, sometimes the fact that design people don't like to read. They prefer to see things a lot of times. Not always, but a lot of times. So anyway, those are some thoughts about that. But yeah, so neatness and alignment of things, whether it's really on a grid or not, is extremely helpful. You can have a lot of information here. Oh, and just look again about the way there are pieces to this page. It scrolls a lot, and there's a lot going on. And again, you have at the top, you have the main most important featured thing for this section, in this case, or for the home page, and if you're on the home page. And then you go down, and then there are all these very inviting, interesting looking articles. And of course, someone took a lot of time to come up with good headlines and good images and all of that. But it's just gorgeous. And I mean, there's an awful lot of information on here, and it just is beautiful. And then you get down to the bottom here, and you have this really nice footer that again has other ways to get around and also to connect with social media, things like that. I think another thing I want to say is that the little things that happen here, everything is kind of nicely understated. It really understands that if you use a backdrop that's very plain and simple, and then the things that show up are the things that jump out from that. I mean, this is a site that's designed to house a lot of information and a lot of graphic stuff, and so the fact that it's really very plain and simple makes all of these nice illustrations and photographs really jump out at you. Or this join button as well. So Mashable is a really famous social media site. I don't love the banner at the top here. That's not so amazing. But there are some nice little rewards here. Again, if you hover over, and they're color coded. These are the very carefully thought through categories of information for the site. There's a little reward if you click over here and it does something. And again, it's just these little things that somehow feel alive. I like this. I like this site a lot. I don't like the advertising stuff personally. I like the footer. There's little rewards here. And obviously a great deal of thought about organization and how to find things. I mean, the beauty in the organization and the simplicity and the alignment are as much about creating a feeling that you will find things that you are trying to find. And obviously the information architecture is essential. Someone thought long and hard about what things needed to be on these different categories, what the categories were going to be, and they'll evolve over time. Yeah, and so I want to say that these sites are like information appliances. They're not like pages. I mean, I guess they're sort of like magazines. But when I'm interacting with a site like this, I'm interacting with an information appliance that I can sit there and instantly get what I'm trying to get if I press the right buttons. And so if they're the wrong buttons, I'm going to be very frustrated. So that's again where you can't really separate design from information architecture. Jason Santamaria is one of the best web designers out there. I think he's amazing. He has a lot of really neat stuff in here. Like he'll do different pages. He'll do different design layouts for different pages, which is really bold sometimes. Can't find any of the... There's some really dramatic ones. Okay, here's a really dramatic one. I love this. I think this is so it's just cool. It's just so totally different. But anyway, again, he exemplifies the use of rules and white space and just really respecting and grid, respecting the viewer, and then also this very much of an active footer with these tiny little rules, again, understatement, care, organization, just like really, really thoughtful. So